The recent popularity of regional approaches in social sciences, including historical studies, can be seen as an alternative to traditional national historiographies, as well as a reaction to some political changes, such as the end of the Cold War and especially the disappearance of division lines. In particular, in the Baltic Sea region, this meant the establishment of contacts and cooperations. With that, Baltic Sea region histories have started to be written with new enthusiasm. Seeing that, one can ask oneself a question: was it a new idea, and did it appeal to all in the region? To answer these questions, we can look at two examples from two opposite sides of the Baltic Sea, and at the same time from the two opposite sides of the Iron Curtain, and not only look at the post-Cold War period, but also to reach back into the past to the interwar period. If we do that, the first thing that becomes visible is an asymmetry. Namely, in the interwar period, there was comparatively much Baltic Sea region research in Poland, while there was very little in Sweden. In the post-Cold War period, the situation is reversed. There is quite a lot of research in Sweden, while very little in Poland. This difference can be explained through very different political cultures and intellectual traditions in those two countries, as well as their very different geopolitical situations in those two periods, and different visions of foreign policy and the place on the international arena. To be more specific, in Sweden, in the interwar period, the guiding principle of international relations was the principle of neutrality, which meant that Sweden was very unwilling to get involved in the European power play or to be involved in any kind of cooperation which would put it in one region with the threatened unstable regions on the other side of the Baltic Sea. This made Sweden shy away from the topic of the Baltic Sea region cooperation and to prefer the framework of Nordic unity. In the post-Cold War period, on the other side, there appeared an increased willingness to follow a more European path, which was expressed, for example, by Sweden joining the European Union, as well as the fear of marginalization of the country. Therefore, the framework of Nordic unity was, at least to some extent, replaced by that of the unity of the Baltic Sea region, which was, for example, expressed by such concepts as the Mediterranean of the North. When we look at Poland, on the other hand, in the interwar period, the dominating factor was Poland's weak position on the Baltic Sea and the need to strengthen this position, and especially to defend this position against the German revisionist claims and arguments that Poles were not a maritime nation and therefore they did not need any access to the sea. To this aim, a research institution was founded in Poland in 1925 called the Baltic Institute. Its task was to present historical, political and economic arguments backing the Polish presence on the sea, as well as to appeal to its own government and the society for an active maritime policy. In the post-Cold War period, of course, this threat is already gone, and with that, historical research came back to its original traditional topics, such as the dominant pattern of looking at Poland's history and its current interest in terms of its relations to the East and to the West. So without the threat, there was little willingness to contest this traditional historiography and look to other directions, such as the northern direction or the direction of the Baltic Sea. Furthermore, by comparison in time, we can also identify dominating factors influencing the Baltic Sea region discourse in those two countries in those two periods. And then we will see that in the interwar period, the dominating factor was the growing threat from the regional powers, Germany and the USSR. In the case of Poland, the main threat was seen in Germany and its revisionist claims and the threat to access to the sea through the so-called corridor. In Sweden, on the other hand, the threat was seen in form of Russia or in the USSR, And the fear was expressed not only explicitly, but also by the sole fact of shying away from the topic of the Baltic region cooperation. This was additionally fueled by the traditional historiography of the Swedish great power era of the 17th century, when also Russia was the biggest threat, or the biggest enemy. In the post-Cold War period, on the other hand, the dominating factor is the end of the Cold War and the increasing European integration. For Sweden, the disappearance of the division lines, and both political and mental division lines, made it possible and safe to seek cooperation with the countries on the other side of the Baltic Sea and seek the common past with those countries, especially the Baltic states. In Poland, on the other hand, there appeared fears how the country would find its new place in this changed political situation, and also certain distrust towards the West. Therefore, concepts such as Baltic Europe appeared, which were supposed to place Poland in this new European political situation. Moreover, by looking back to the interwar period, we can see that the idea of common Baltic region history that became popular in the 1990s was not really so new, although it had some new elements, some new features, such as it concentrated on cooperation rather than conflict. It conveyed a belief in usefulness of history, but also awareness of its possible risks. It had no claim to objectivity, and its main aim was to create a sense of a shared past which could provide the basis for regional cooperation. However, at the same time, there have been elements from the earlier historiographies, and many ideas that appeared after 1989 had already been present in previous times, so there has been some continuity. Furthermore, it has to be said that the idea of Baltic region cooperation and Baltic region common history has not been equally popular in all the countries of the region. It was more popular in the northwest part of the Baltic region than in the southeastern part. And also, the contemporary events have had great influence on the historical narratives in the region, but we cannot say the same about influence in the other direction. So postulates such as the one of Polish maritime consciousness in the 1930s or common Baltic region identity in the 1990s have not proved to be so really very successful. A conclusion can be drawn from all this that the idea of the Baltic region cooperation has not turned out to be particularly attractive. And despite being a geographically relatively small area and compact area, it seems to be too heterogeneous to form a unified region.